All right, so if you want a masterclass on putting politics ahead of people, I think you need to look no further than Michelle Wu, because just as Donald Trump signed a major new executive order, which was called the Protecting American Communities from Criminal Aliens Act, just like clockwork, these sanctuary city mayors, like Boston's Michelle Wu, are doubling, if not tripling down, claiming that these policies are all about public safety and they're all about community trust. But I think that may only pertain to a certain subsection of a community, in my opinion. And honestly, I think Michelle is potentially making a mistake here. And it's a mistake that will cost and continue to cost millions upon millions of dollars, amongst other things. So that's why I'm making this video today. So let me break this down for you. Because when you follow some of the data and you don't necessarily rely solely on emotion, I think the facts paint a different picture. And I'm going to get into that in a few minutes here. First of all, let me talk about the executive order. So Trump is demanding that both the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security publish a list of jurisdictions that are actively obstructing federal immigration law. And not only that, he's also attempting to order them to identify which federal funds can be cut off as a consequence of, let's say, obstructing the federal immigration laws. Now, here's something I think a lot of people do not realize. It's when a city like Boston, who their policies can end up trickling down to other communities, municipalities, you get the picture. When they refuse to cooperate with ICE, and these federal immigration officers, they're actually putting serious federal funding at risk, amongst other things. And remember, the key here is that this money isn't necessarily earmarked for immigration issues. This is not the case at all. A lot of people do not realize this. Normally, this money from the federal government is supposed to go towards critical local services. Things like figure hospitals, schools, roads, police officers, fire departments, and probably some public safety programs. That's what I would think that this is for. These are essential services that everyday citizens like you and I may rely on. That's what's at risk here. So under Trump's new executive order, if a city like Boston breaks federal law by sheltering illegal immigrants and refusing to help ICE, the federal government is going to be able to legally cut off those funds, which is going to really affect, I think, a city like Boston, because budgets are bloated throughout the state, budgets are bloated throughout Boston. This is just going to make things significantly worse. So when politicians like Michelle Wu are out here virtue signaling about being a sanctuary city, they are effectively, at this stage of the game, gambling with your money. And that money is what keeps parts of the city running. And that money is meant for everyone, not just for illegal immigration. And Michelle has somehow become the loudest defender of sanctuary city policies. I could actually do a future video on that. But a good tell from this was during her March 5th testimony, she kept on saying that Boston is the safest major city. It's safe for everyone. And that crime, they don't track crime based on immigration status. So how could you simultaneously have two truths at the same time, where you're not tracking crime on immigration status, yet if there is illegal immigration, it's not attributing to the crime? That data doesn't make any sense. Anyway, we'll get into, like I said, we'll get into that in a future video. But here's the deal. What we won't tell you is what's happening behind the scenes, because in my opinion, the data shows some cracks in the narrative, and she's essentially gambling with public safety, and there are numbers to prove it. You see, what happens here is when politicians use data as a method of deflection or redirection, whatever you want to call it, what it does is it creates some levels of discovery. And it also creates an opportunity to reverse engineer those numbers to get a more realistic scope of how many criminals may actually be out there. And here's what I mean. If you look at Massachusetts as a whole, there were in total around 370 illegal immigrants that were arrested for violent crimes. Now, these are not traffic tickets. These are not like, let's say, paperwork violations. These are violent crimes. This is murder. This is rape. You get the picture. So let's use that number, 370, as a baseline. Massachusetts has also claimed to have an estimated 355,000 illegal immigrants right now, per the Center of Immigration Studies. Furthermore, alternative studies also show that undocumented immigrants commit violent crimes at about half of the rate of native-born citizens, roughly around 0.50% per person per year. So, and by the way, that number, I did another video in the past called the incentive framework. Basically, if you incentivize people, you're giving them things, of course, they're going to be less likely to commit crime, okay? Because they're a little more better off than most of the time, at least now, than the citizens of the state, right? It's just how it goes by creating incentives. But at 370, if you use that math, that's roughly 1,775 potential violent criminals that could still be walking our streets here in Massachusetts, because that's based off of the number of 370 of the arrests that have been made. So if you factor in that about half of the violent criminals lead to an arrest, that means that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of violent criminals that are still out there right now, free to walk the streets, protected by sanctuary city policies. Okay, that's the way that goes. You're taking the 370 number and the 355K number, and that's you figure it out based on the amount of crime that could potentially be committed. All right, and refusal to cooperate with federal immigration law is reckless, in my opinion, and it's putting innocent people in direct harm's way. Now, I know there may be defenders of sanctuary cities out there going to flood the comments and see, well, it's only 99.5% that aren't violent criminals, but that completely misses the forest for the trees. Because when you have an estimated 355,000 illegal immigrants living in Massachusetts, even a small percentage committing violent crimes leads to a massive public safety risk, okay? Based on crime data, we're talking about, as I said, upwards of 1,775 violent crimes, assaults, murders, rapes committed by people who shouldn't even be here in the first place. Shouldn't be happening at all, okay? Every single one of those crimes could potentially be preventable. And if our immigration laws have been or had been properly enforced, many of those victims would still be either alive today or safe today. Sanctuary policies like Michelle Wu and what she tries to serve everybody, they don't just bend the law, all right? They leave innocent people to pay the ultimate price. But this is collateral damage, I guess, if you want to call it that. And what happens is Democrats are okay with collateral damage if it benefits their cause. Collateral damage, when it's bestowed upon U.S. citizens, gets absolutely no respect and no attention. Collateral damage on the opposite side, like when perhaps a legal migrant is arrested, that will get all of the attention, because that collateral damage is a big no-no in the eyes of a democratic state like Massachusetts, and it gets completely blown out of proportion. But when it's a U.S. citizen, that's the collateral damage, nobody says a peep. Doesn't come up on legacy media, nothing, right? It's hypocrisy is what it is. And by the way, here's the kicker. Massachusetts sanctuary policies are being championed by people like Michelle, and they are actively making it harder for ICE to do their jobs. So when local law enforcement is ordered not to cooperate with immigration authorities, there are dangerous individuals that will slip through the cracks. They get put back onto the streets. It's happening. It's happening all over. It's not only happening here, but it's more so happening in states that have these sanctuary policies and or right to shelter laws. If you look at what happened in 2018, Boston ICE the office there, they reported arresting around 456 criminal aliens in 10 weeks. That's about 46 per week, right? So think about this. While politicians like Wu are busy holding press conferences about compassion, ICE agents are risking their lives to catch dangerous people that the city and city officials refuse to even detain. Let me be completely honest here. Sanctuary policies aren't about safety. They are about political optics. They are about scoring points with activist groups, with people on Reddit, with people on Blue Sky, and that's all that it is. Meanwhile, everyday people and law-abiding citizens, hardworking citizens, are the ones that end up paying the price. Federal funding is not unlimited, guys. It is not unlimited. And if Boston loses grants because Wu refuses to comply with federal immigration law, who do you think pays the price? It's the schools. It's the hospitals. It's the first responders. It's the police. It's people that are trying to combat fires, right? Like that's who this is affecting, not the politicians. And remember, this isn't about just one executive order or another. This is a national trend. This is if you look at states and cities like San Francisco and New York City, they tried to play the same games, these sanctuary city games during Trump's first term. And federal courts repeatedly found that when cities can set, let's say, policing priorities, they can't outright obstruct federal law. Why do we have laws if they could be obstructed without any levels of punishment, right? Trump's new 2025 order is crafted with, I think, the lessons of the past in mind, meaning it's going to be much harder to challenge these things in court this time around because now he has a proof of concept. Perhaps it worked a little bit, perhaps it didn't back in 2018. Now things have changed. And Michelle is leading Boston straight into another legal and financial disaster, all while pretending she's protecting people. Let me be clear. America has always welcomed immigrants, legal immigrants, people who respect the rule of law and come here the right way. And again, why even have laws if they are not being enforced? But really, sanctuary policies, what they end up doing, they blur that line. And that is the issue. They send a clear message that immigration laws here are optional, that they're optional. That's the key. And that breaking those laws to come here is somehow not just forgiven, but it's also rewarding. And again, that is enticed by the incentive framework, right? It's insane, is what it is. No other country operates this way. Try sneaking into Mexico or Japan or France, right? Without documents, and see how long it takes before you're arrested and you're deported. And yet in Massachusetts, you get a driver's license, you get taxpayer-funded benefits, and politicians, they're all sitting there patting each other on the back. Meanwhile, violent crime is rising nationally, and the last thing Boston needs is a policy that makes it easier for violent offenders to stay in their communities. It's unbelievable to me, guys. I cannot believe I am talking about this, and this is actually a problem. I cannot believe enforcing federal law is a problem. And, you know, Wu says that she wants Boston to be the safest major city, but you don't achieve that by breaking laws, right? And turning your city into some levels of like a lawless haven. You do it by enforcing law consistently and fairly. What's good for one person should be good for the other, and what's bad for one person should be bad for the other. And they need to make sure that those that are breaking these immigration laws, especially those who commit serious crimes, are removed from the community as quickly and safely as possible, not on a $500 bail. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. So here's the bottom line. I think Michelle is making a serious mistake by opposing Trump's executive order. Call it like it is. And I think that she's gambling with money, public safety, and again, there's a massive risk here of losing money, which is a problem. And it's going to hurt people that are citizens of the state. And as I said earlier, you're putting politics ahead of people. She's supposed to protect the people, right? Sanctuary city policies, I think they sound nice at a press conference, but we could kind of see through this facade. I see this through the facade, and this will have consequences. And sometimes those consequences are deadly. Boston deserves better leadership. I think Boston deserves a mayor who puts citizens first and not criminals. Okay, that's my take on this. Anyway, that's it for today's video, guys. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.